So how do you define a loser? Seriously, just think about it for a second.
Right.
Because if you look around at our culture, the definition almost always boils down to, well, a material deficit.
Yeah.
Lack of money, a lack of social status, maybe a failed business venture.
Yeah, exactly. Or getting passed over for that big promotion at work.
Right. The societal scorecard is basically entirely built on these visible, worldly metrics.
You lose the game of capitalism or the game of social climbing, and society is very quick to just, slap that label on you.
It's completely external. But today, we are stepping entirely outside of that societal scorecard. We're taking a deep dive into a cosmic definition of a loser, basically looking through the lens of Islamic theology.
Which is a huge shift in perspective.
It really is, and you, our listener, actually sent us an incredibly rich stack of sources for this. We have the complete translated text of the Quran, the Sahih Hadith, and the Tafsir, which are the comprehensive commentaries, and we're specifically focusing on chapter 2, verse 27 of the Quran.
Yeah, and the mission here is to take this stack of texts and look at it purely through the psychological and spiritual blueprint it provides.
Exactly. And just to be clear up front, as guides on this deep dive, we aren't endorsing any specific religious viewpoints or taking sides. We are just impartially unpacking the original text you provided.
Right, because whether you are a firm believer or, just a curious skeptic, the underlying logic presented here about how a human being spiritually bankrupts themselves is just fascinating.
It is a profound worldview. So setting the stage, give us a brief overview of what this verse actually says.
Well, this specific verse basically operates as a stark contrast. It outlines the defining qualities of a disbeliever by contrasting them directly with the qualities of a believer.
Okay.
And the core premise is that true loss has absolutely nothing to do with your bank account. It doesn't start with finances. It starts with a broken promise.
A broken promise.
Yeah. The first defining trait of the ultimate loser, according to the text, is someone who breaks their pledge with Allah, the Creator, after giving their word.
See, I'm stuck on that concept of a pledge right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Because a pledge implies a mutual agreement, right? You sit down, you read the terms, you sign a contract.
Right, a conscious agreement.
Yeah, and I think most people walking around today would say, I never signed a contract with a creator. So what exactly is the mechanism of this pledge?
So the Tafsir breaks this down into a few distinct layers. It starts with something called a primordial pledge.
Primordial, like before we were born.
Exactly. The theology posits that before physical existence, a pledge was given by Adam, and by extension, all the children of Adam. So that means every single human soul.
Oh, wow.
It's essentially an innate spiritual contract woven into human consciousness, testifying that Allah alone is their Lord. It acts as an internal compass.
Okay, so it's universal. But does it get more specific than that?
It does. The verse also addresses very specific historical pledges. For instance, the pledge in the Torah, which the texts state bound the Jewish tribes to support Prophet Muhammad in his mission when he arrived.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back a little on the historical application of that.
Sure, go ahead.
It's easy to say people broke a contract, but thousands of years ago, information didn't exactly travel fast. And, political dynamics were incredibly complex. How does the text justify blaming people who might not have had the full picture?
Well, the sources are actually very specific that this was not just some casual misunderstanding. It wasn't a lack of information.
Right.
Yeah. Breaking a covenant in this context means actively disregarding it despite knowing the truth. The historical accounts in the commentary describe groups who recognized the prophet perfectly well. They saw the undeniable proofs.
Like actual miracles.
Exactly. They witnessed miracles brought by messengers that no other creation could possibly produce. But instead of honoring the pledge they had sworn to uphold, they actively hid the truth from the people.
Wow, just to protect their own worldly interests. They saw the undeniable proof, and they still walked away. The phrase used in the translation here is so striking. It says, they threw the covenant behind their backs and sold it for a miserable price.
A miserable price, yes.
But let's dig into that mechanism. What makes the price miserable? Are we talking about a literal bribe? Like bags of gold?
It's broader than that. Any amount of worldly gain or money that attracts Allah's anger is classified here as a miserable price.
Because it's temporary.
Exactly. The psychology of this is what's really interesting. Why do humans make this trade? It essentially comes down to a failure to comprehend mathematical infinity.
I like that framing. Mathematical infinity.
Right, because the immediate gratification of wealth, power, or social standing in this temporary life is mathematically insignificant compared to an eternal reality. You have no idea what is in heaven and hell, so you are trading an infinite long-term gain for a fleeting payout.
Okay, let me push back on this from a modern perspective, though. It makes perfect sense if someone witnesses a literal miracle and then chooses to hide it. That is an active, malicious choice. But what about the person today who is just, well, totally unaware? If this verse applies to all of mankind, as the commentaries say it does, what about someone ignorant of this primordial contract? Can you really be held liable for a spiritual contract you didn't even know you were supposed to read?
I get that, but the foundational logic of this worldview basically dismantles willful ignorance as a defense. The texts are completely uncompromising on this point.
So ignorance is not an excuse.
Not at all. Ignorance is not an excuse for abandoning your duties and responsibilities. The Creator knows exactly what you know. You cannot arrive at the day of judgment and just pretend you didn't know because your own human intellect betrays that defense.
Because of our capacity to reason, like our worldly logic.
Exactly. The comparative argument presented in the commentaries is just brilliant. Think about what a human being is capable of understanding. We meticulously learn and follow incredibly complex earthly systems.
Oh, like tax codes and property laws.
Yes, or engineering software. If you have the intellectual bandwidth to navigate the rules of a modern society, you inherently possess the bandwidth to seek out your existential purpose. If you follow laws and rules in this life, why not get ready for your afterlife?
Basically, if you can read the terms of service on a banking app, you can read up on your spiritual obligations.
That is a great way to put it. Your own worldly logic, if applied with sincerity, will lead you to the truth. Choosing not to apply that logic to your spiritual life is an active decision.
So the burden is on you to do sincere research if you have a doubt. And failing to do so triggers a very dangerous sequence of events, right? Which brings us to the second characteristic of the loser mentioned in the verse.
Right, the ripple effect. Once that vertical pledge with the Creator is broken, the loser begins cutting the bonds that Allah explicitly ordered to be kept.
And if someone has completely severed their tie with God, what is stopping them from just burning down everything else in their life?
Nothing at all. And that is why the texts place such a massive emphasis on the ties of kinship. The family unit is the foundational horizontal bond.
Oh, interesting. So it starts with family.
Yes, and there is a vital nuance in the commentary here. Simply drifting apart from a relative, maybe not talking to them, is viewed negatively. But actively being bad or hostile toward your relatives is categorized as a severe spiritual crime.
Because you are commanded to nurture those relationships.
Exactly. Everything Allah has commanded to nurture, and the people severed, is included in the meaning of this ayat, or verse.
Family is the unchosen bond. You don't pick them. So if you can justify severing the unchosen bonds of your own blood, you can pretty much justify severing any connection in society.
Which naturally invites the third trait.
Causing trouble in the land.
Yes. And a troublemaker in this theological framework is not just someone who is a bit disruptive. The definition is someone entirely out of control, who constantly disobeys Allah and actively challenges his prophets. They pollute the social and spiritual environment around them.
It's like a structural collapse, a complete domino effect. First, you sever the anchor, the vertical contract with the Creator. Without that anchor, the horizontal ties to your family snap.
And then the final domino falls.
Yeah, you cause chaos in the wider world. The internal spiritual decay manifests entirely outward.
This sequence perfectly illustrates what the concept of loss actually means here. We usually think of a loser as someone who failed to acquire something, right?
Right, like missing out on a deal.
But the verse defines a loser as someone who has actively decreased their own share of Allah's mercy through their disobedience. And the Tafsir introduces a really powerful analogy to explain this mechanism, the merchant.
Oh, I loved this part of the reading. Walk me through the spiritual economy of this merchant analogy.
So think of a merchant operating in a high-stakes market. Their entire livelihood depends on their capital. In this framework, the ultimate capital is divine mercy.
Okay, mercy is the capital.
The texts state that on the Day of Judgment, Allah has a specific share of mercy in store for each person. That day is the exact moment, the final market, where a human being will need that capital the absolute most.
But what happens to the loser?
The hypocrite or the disbeliever arrives at that final market completely bankrupt. They have dwindled their capital down to zero through their actions in this world, just like a merchant losing in his trade via capital loss.
But how does that actually happen on, like, a random Tuesday?
Mhm.
What are the daily mechanics of draining this bank account of mercy? Does every single minor mistake just chip away at the capital?
The overarching rule laid out in the sources is profound in its simplicity. Do not do what Allah prohibits using the very things Allah gave you.
Wow.
For a Muslim, doing something prohibited is sinning a withdrawal that can be replenished through sincere repentance. But for a non-Muslim, persistently ignoring these boundaries is what defines the ultimate loss and makes them a disbeliever.
So you are taking the capital you were loaned and using it to short the market of the one who loaned it to you. You use the eyes you were gifted to look at something forbidden, or the wealth you were provided to fund something corrupt. It's just the ultimate form of ingratitude.
And this bankruptcy does not happen overnight. The psychology of habit formation is deeply embedded here. It is the little actions. Small, seemingly insignificant acts of disobedience become routine.
They compound.
Yes. Over time, those routines crystallize into a person's permanent personality. You don't wake up one morning and decide to be a troublemaker who severs ties. It is a gradual, daily hardening of the heart until the spiritual bank account is just empty.
Which makes the end game all the more terrifying, because we aren't just talking about a bad credit score in the afterlife.
No, we aren't. The ultimate consequence outlined here for a loser is being thrown into hellfire. The texts note a specific theological boundary here, though. Only Allah knows if a particular individual will remain in that state forever or not.
But the reality of the punishment itself is absolute.
Yes, it is severe.
You know, it is incredibly hard for the modern mind to really grasp the concept of hellfire.
Yeah.
We are so insulated by modern comforts that it sounds like, I don't know, an abstract myth or something from a medieval painting.
Right.
But reading through the notes you're highlighted from the commentary, there was a psychological framing that terrified me. It completely bypasses the abstract.
Oh, you mean the analogy regarding memory? Yeah, it really grounds the theology in immediate human experience.
It does. It asks us a really simple question. If you are walking around today thinking you are strong enough or stoic enough to tolerate hellfire, stop and think about your bad memories.
Just the invisible memories that haunt you right now.
Exactly. The moments of deep grief, the trauma, all the humiliating mistakes that you would absolutely eliminate from your history if you could. If mere invisible echoes of the past have the power to cause you so much visceral psychological pain in the present, why on earth would you put yourself in a position to face hellfire, which is the most absolute, tangible pain imaginable?
It completely strips away our defensive abstractions. It forces you to confront the limits of your own psychological endurance. And it targets a recurring theme throughout these texts, which is human arrogance.
We really do walk around on this earth feeling invincible.
We do. We build massive cities, we engineer incredible technology, and we develop this profound sense of self-sufficiency.
Like we've conquered reality.
Exactly. But shift your perspective for a second. If you look at the Earth from space, we as human beings are virtually indistinguishable from ants.
Just tiny specks.
We are incredibly fragile, minuscule creatures operating in an incomprehensibly vast cosmos. Yet the Lord who sustains all of this, the entity feeding every single creation across all universes, is issuing a direct warning.
And the logical conclusion drawn by the text is undeniable.
Yeah.
When the creator of the universe tells you that hell is a terrible place to be, then we should listen.
Right. Get back on the right track while you still have time, because the day of judgment will come.
And yet, we perpetually hit the snooze button on our spiritual lives. We procrastinate. The texts dive into this human flaw by exploring our relationship with time, specifically the illusion of second chances.
Human beings operate on the assumption of tomorrow. We make a mistake, we feel a pang of guilt, and we tell ourselves, well, I'll fix it later. We rely on the universe to give us a second chance.
Right, like a 3 strikes rule.
But the warning here is stark. Just because you were granted a second chance or maybe multiple second chances in your past, there is absolutely zero guarantee you will get another one.
The idea that your next breath is guaranteed is purely a statistical assumption, not a promise. Any moment can be our last moment.
And even if you're somehow guaranteed one final chance, do you honestly expect to be informed in advance? You will not get a notification that this is your last opportunity to course correct. The expectations have already been clearly communicated by Allah through his messengers in the Quran.
Which introduces a massive cognitive dissonance depending on how you view the world around you. There is a core philosophical concept in these commentaries about the nature of our daily environment. For some, this world is a paradise, and for others, it functions almost like a prison.
It revolves entirely around the concept of boundaries. For a believer who's adhering to the covenant, this world can feel like a prison. There are strict rules governing how you acquire wealth, what you consume, how you treat your relatives, and what desires you are allowed to act upon.
Operating within those confines requires immense discipline.
It does. But for a non-believer, someone who has thrown the covenant behind their back, this world is paradise. They live entirely without those boundaries, chasing every immediate gratification.
They are cashing out their spiritual capital for that miserable price right now.
Sure.
This is literally as good as it gets for them.
But the great equalizer, the reality that encompasses both the self-made paradise and the disciplined prison, is observation. In either state, Allah is always watching. Nothing goes unnoticed, which demands an incredibly high level of self-awareness.
And that awareness requires brutal honesty about our own actions. There is a rhetorical question posed by the underlying theology that really forces this reflection. In the exact moment you are sinning, when you are actively crossing a boundary or breaking a rule, do you really think you are acting as a believer in that moment?
The psychological reality is that you are not. A believer and a disbeliever are fundamentally different states of being. In the very moment of deliberate disobedience, you are momentarily adopting the exact characteristics of the loser described in verse 27. You are actively severing a tie.
It forces you to drop the labels you use to comfort yourself. You might call yourself a good person or a believer, but in the moment of action, your behavior aligns perfectly with the blueprint of spiritual bankruptcy.
Because again, it is the little actions that become habits and then a person's personality.
Right. So let's bring all of these threads together. Based on this deep dive into chapter 2, verse 27, the Sahih Hadith and the comprehensive Tafsirs, the ultimate loser defies every modern metric we use to measure success.
It is an entirely internal cosmic ledger. The true loser is the individual who actively breaks their foundational contract with existence, despite possessing the human intellect required to recognize the truth.
And it is the person who turns their back on the unchosen bonds of family, severing vital human connections, and whose internal decay spills outward, causing chaos and disruption in the wider world.
They take the invaluable capital of divine mercy, the one currency they will desperately need when the final market opens on the day of judgment, and they squander it. They trade eternal reality for the miserable, fleeting price of immediate earthly gratification.
They operate under the arrogant illusion of infinite time, forgetting that their existence is as fragile as an ant's, and their next breath is never guaranteed.
And perhaps the most insidious part of this loss is its gradual nature. They allow small acts of disobedience, using the very gifts they were loaned, to form habits that slowly calcify into their permanent personality, leaving them facing a reality far more devastating than their worst, most haunting memories.
It is a profoundly heavy framework that completely dismantles our everyday understanding of what it means to win or lose in life.
It really is.
And so we want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over. We spent this time unpacking how daily repeated habits eventually forge a permanent spiritual personality. We discussed how every human is a merchant who desperately needs capital for a market that could open at any unpredictable moment without warning. Look at the mechanics of your life today. What kind of capital are your seemingly insignificant routine choices building right now? When you look at the habits you are silently forming today, are you trading an eternal reality for a temporary fragile paradise? Or are you securing your ultimate share of mercy?
الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض أولئك هم الخاسرون
الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض أولئك هم الخاسرون